Welcome to Crest podcast in partnership with Elusive, the Wales-based environmentally conscious apparel and lifestyle brand. It's a great episode this week with a literal giant figure from Northern European surf culture. Al Mennie may be most recently known to those of you with Instagram accounts for his swim through darkness appeal, but that's just the latest in a range of incredible feats that have characterised his life. So, Tom and Elliot have caught up with him just after finishing the swim to see how he's doing, discuss his life story to date, and ask what he's doing next. This episode does include some challenging subject matter in relation to mental health, so if you are affected, we recommend reaching out to somebody and we give details about that at the end of the show. That being said, there's lots of laughs along the way, so I'll leave you to enjoy Al Mennie.
Towering figure in the world of European and indeed world surfing, Al Mennie has trailblazed some of the most intimidating spots this corner of the world has to offer.
Mavericks, Nazare, Elite, Mulligmore. Al's zone begins when most surfers are headed back to shore. We'll be asking him about motivation, mentality, and the sheer fun of it too.
And then there's the swim through darkness, a feat I can't even begin to imagine. All this and more, so stay tuned.
Welcome to the show, Al.
Hi, Elliot. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's an honour, Al. And yeah, joining us today, you just named him as my co-host. It's two-time European longboard champion, Elliot Dudley. Welcome to the show, Elliot.
Thanks, Tom.
Now, Al and I go back a long way, but being busy happens to the best of us. And we were just working out that until we spoke on the phone recently, it's probably been quite a while, hasn't it, Al? A little bit longer than we thought.
I think it's been about 20 years. I just
couldn't believe that.
I just turned that number that begins with 4 and ends in 0, and I think the last time we saw each other was about the year 2000 or something.
Goodness me!
Yeah.
Well, it would have been a little bit later because it would have been when the BPSAs, because they were.
Well, when it was called the BPSA, so that was a fair
when
while.
It was called the BPSA.
Yeah, true.
2003, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Then. Yeah, true.
Yeah. So a lot of catching up to do, and we'll get through a fair bit of it on today's episode of Crest in partnership with Elusive. And I am making a hard and fast promise here, Al, to head your way for a visit in person soon, because Breege's family are all in Belfast, so there's no excuse, really.
Oh, that's right. Yes, right enough. Very good. Yeah, you got to. But you did say that 20 years ago.
or 17 or whatever.
Or 17 years ago, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, who knows? It won't take that long this time, I promise you. Especially since it looks like Indo and France are both going to be banned for ever anyway, isn't it? And it's a B&B that you run up there, right? In Castle Rock.
It's only £400 a night.
Perfect.
Get the 10% discount code though, you'll be all right, Tom.
400 of your best Welsh money.
Yeah. That though, dear listeners, is merely scratching the surface of the incredible character that is Al Mennie. So allow us to fill you in with a little background before we start. Picking up the standard hot grom decorations back in the 90s, Al then moved to the southwest of England at the turn of the millennium to spend even more time making a name for himself in the contest jersey. A solid few years on the then BPSA, as Elliot just points out, now named differently, when it was attracting a very large international contingent, actually, some of the sort of halcyon days of that tour, wasn't it? Preceded some other very interesting career paths within the world of surfing. Some were by choice, others perhaps not so much.
I'm sure most of you are aware of the fact that the island of Ireland gets some pretty decent sized surf from time to time. Well, through the first decade of this millennium, it was Al who pioneered a lot of these spots as part of his Project Red journeys, as well as some other places further afield too. He was among the early crews to take on Nazare in Portugal, at the time when Garrett McNamara smashed the then world record for the biggest wave ever ridden. Increasingly comfortable once most other mortals are headed for the shower, Al is one of these characters who truly defines the idea of a Northern European waterman. Multidisciplinary, bold and resilient to the freezing temperatures frequently encountered in these parts of the world.
Which brings us to his most recent feat. Swim through darkness. 100 kilometres through the winter at night. Think about how cold that water must have been. Think about those ice cream headaches and the darkness. And all this to raise an incredible sum of money for Aware NI. Last time I looked, it was over 15k, I think.
It's 17 now.
Wow. Yeah, amazing.
We're going to ask a bit more about the actual sensation of swim through darkness a little later, Al. But can I just start by asking you to fill us in with what you've been doing since it finished? Glad to have your evenings back, or are you on to something else? The weather warms up for spring.
It's been weird because I was supposed to stay out of the water for a full month. So I finished this on the 28th of February, the last day of the month. And I was supposed to stay out of the water for a full month just to recover, because over time, obviously, going into the water over and over again and swimming that distance every night, that depletes your immune system. So I've been trying to recover, but I haven't actually been able to stay out of the water. I've been in swimming and body surfing, but I haven't done the distances every night. I've just gone in and body surfed a bit. And I was going to surf today, but the surf wasn't that good. So I just thought I'd save myself for another couple of days. So it's been very strange because I started that swim on the 1st of December. So think about that. It's 3 months of every single night going out into the sea in the dark. To then all of a sudden just stop it was a wee bit unusual.
Yeah.
Because every day for 3 months I was thinking about the next swim and looking at the conditions all day and planning it out and make sure somebody could be there to keep an eye on me. And it was quite an organizational thing. And eventually when it stopped, it was a bit weird. It's a bit weird. But the thing is, the reason I started the whole swim was because I was trying to avoid people. And we've been inundated with people here on the North Coast through the whole pandemic. And I found it really difficult to actually go surfing or be in the water without loads of people being on the beach. So I started swimming at night in the dark in September. And that's really where it started off.
So you'd built up quite a bit up to that point where you started swimming. You'd already kind of worked your way up. You didn't just, December just start doing it.
Yeah, it's weird because I actually just started body surfing and playing about in the sea in the dark. And then pretty much everything I take on, I end up doing it the extremes, and started to try and swim distances. So I started swimming the full length of the beach, and it just kind of built up into it. Really, that's really how it sort of happened. And then I realized the similarities between what I was doing and what everybody's facing at the minute. But yeah, sorry to answer your question. Yeah, since I've stopped it, it's been a bit weird. I usually write books in the winter. I usually sit down in the winter and write books at night because it's so dark and I can get into the story. But this winter I was swimming a lot, so I haven't done any of that.
So what was an average night then in terms of distance? What kind of distance would you be covering?
I usually tried to swim a kilometre. Now, the thing is, I wasn't swimming in the open ocean. I was swimming in the surf zone. And you guys will know all about the surf zone. The currents are all over the place. And when you're not on a surfboard and you're in the water swimming, you're obviously subject to being moved around a lot. So I was swimming in the surf. So I set out every night to swim a kilometre. That was my sort of the main objective. And virtually every night I swam the kilometre, by hook or by crook. Sometimes I had to go with the current, then turn if I couldn't overcome it. And, the surf's also pounding as well. So there's rips and all that sort of stuff. But on some nights where the conditions were better than others, I would swim up to 4 kilometres.
Right.
Which took me, sometimes I would swim a kilometre and a half one direction and turn and do 500 metres the other way. And then if it was too strong, I'd turn again. So, it was just bit by bit I chipped away at the whole thing, and that was really what I was trying to sort of get across, that you chip away at the problems, you chip away at whatever the thing is in your mind at the time, and that's what I did.
I mean, it's a great way to kind of get away from it all, isn't there? Especially in the dark, you can't see anything. And
it's honestly, it's amazing. And see the thing I realized about halfway through was I'm out there in this different world, and the real world can't see me, and I can't see it. And it's a total escape from reality. It's amazing. It's an amazing thing to do. But I had my friends came down because of COVID. I couldn't have much safety there other than one person at a time. And I had a police officer, I had a lifeguard and a paramedic. So 3 people rotated with me and came down. So it was always well looked after. But when I started the actual swim, it was very much just me on my own in the dark. And that's really what it's about. And that's what I've gone back to since. I'm now swimming out there again on my own. And it was a funny one because when I realized the similarities between swimming in the darkness and what everybody was facing in the world, I was reluctant about giving away my little thing I'd found, my little escape from the world. But at the same time, I'm glad I did. It made a massive impact, and it's raised quite a lot of money. So I'm glad I did. But I'm now back to doing it on my own, which I also enjoy. It's good. So.
Do you think there's a kind of that resilience, of that kind of kind of almost not against all odds, but against kind of the norm, really? What's perceived to be normal. Most people swim in the day, going out in the night. That kind of resilience. Do you think that's something that's been programmed into you from your upbringing in Belfast, or is it more general than that?
I don't know. Everything I've ever done, I've always wanted to do better, get better at it. So I don't know if it's anything to do with my environment or the way I've been brought up or anything. It might just be me. Do you know what I mean? I'm just quite a stubborn character, stubborn soul, and when I want to do something, I keep going. And you guys are the same. Do you know what I mean? Like you've won serious championships in surfing. You know what it's like to persevere and to keep going. Against all odds. So it's very similar. It's a very similar thing.
Yeah.
Retailer in surf, skate or e-bikes? Contact Full Charge, suppliers of Venom and Studio surfboards, Pro Light leashes, Sniper bodyboards, Churchill swim fins, Ari Nui Seps, Voltaway e-bikes, plus many more. We can also help you advertise your business by designing your own branded embroidered changing robes and towels. For more, contact fullchargerhino@gmail.com.
And do you think there's an element of that born in 1980 Belfast? That is kind of you're born at a particular sort of tension point in Northern European history there, aren't you?
Yeah, well, I was born in the middle of the height of what's referred to in Northern Ireland as the Troubles. It was a period of violence in Northern Ireland, and I think anybody born here and who's lived through that unknowingly is probably very resilient, very I don't know if hardened's the right word, but it's hard to explain. I don't think I think when you live here and you're from here and you grew up here, I don't know if you really know how all that has maybe affected us as people.
It's just part of your life.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's normal. Yeah, it's normal. I went to school right next door to one of the biggest army bases in Northern Ireland, the British Army, and I would every day when we drove in, we would stop, the car would be searched, looked around, and then we would drive on to school. There was soldiers everywhere all the time, Chinooks in the air. I heard a few bombs going off in my lifetime as well so far, and
bombs in childhood.
Yeah, I think the first one I was in we call it P5, which is probably, what do you call it in school over there?
Like year 5, kind of 10 years old.
Yeah, sort of like that sort of age. Yeah. They'd blown up. I don't know who it was, but they'd blown up a car on the other side of the park. Our school in this age group, we were in porta cabins, and the porta cabin was lifted on the side slightly, and the tables and chairs slid across.
Yeah.
That was the first one I think I remember, and then there was two one time together, and they had. If you look it up, you'll see. If you look up Feetful Barracks in Lisburn, they blew up. They got a car in there. I think it was a car bomb in, and they blew up the car, and then they blew up another. They had another one in the grass where everybody had ran. But my dad at the time was actually in the town nearby, and we couldn't get him. All the phones were down, obviously, and there's no mobile phones back then.
Wow.
But I heard that one, and the vibration of the first one actually made the roof on our house. You know what I was doing? I was watching, I think it was Home and Away, while I was eating the dinner. And
that had a sequence of that guy surfing at the start of it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it was that I was watching, and I remember hearing the rumble, and Mum just looked around me and she went, "That's Lisburn or Belfast." She thought it might be Belfast, and we lived out in the country a bit, and it sounded like the whole roof in the house was moving. It was just like,
wow,
like that. It was incredible. And then obviously that because that was in the barracks next to our school, it blew out the glass inside of some of the building. That obviously, I know that sounds like a really dramatic story, and it sounds crazy, and I know that, but in some weird way, that was just normal. We didn't really know anything else back then. We didn't have the internet like we do today to see this sort of stuff in other parts of the world. It just was kind of normal. But I was very lucky. I wasn't, in the middle of it, and yes, I knew people who were closer to it than others and more involved in it and whatever. But I was really lucky. My mum and dad they kept me away from all that sort of stuff, and we were basically on the beach. We found the sea, and that's really what we did. We were, our minds were distracted by that, and so maybe there is some sort of resilience in people from Northern Ireland that is just born and bred into us here. I don't know. I'm sure a psychologist could probably tell you that. If you ask them.
wasn't your father was worked the sea in those days? He was Scottish and worked boats.
Yeah. So my dad was Scottish, and he, like 15 or 16, and he worked in the trawlers on the East Coast here. So yeah, like we were always in boats. We always had a boat, or even if it was a dinghy, or sometimes with a speedboat or slightly bigger boat. We always had something. So we were fishing and water skiing. Like I was water skiing by the time I was 5 or 6, and then I was surfing by the time I was 7 in a tracksuit, and all that just was sort of in our blood, I suppose, because Dad was into the sea. So it was natural. It was a natural progression to be in the sea and to go surfing. And I obviously, people listening probably don't know, I have a brother as well, and we were very close, and we surfed a lot together, and that was a great thing to have. Because nobody really surfed on the beach of Castle Rock back then. There's a few older guys every now and again, but we always had each other, and we surfed. And anybody knows who's got siblings, that makes you fight together and get better and push each other. And it was cool. And we didn't even know that you could do contests or anything like that. It was just a cool time in our lives. We're in our tracksuits, catching waves with boogie boards, and then
but surfing in a tracksuit, like as in to keep you warm.
Well, I've been to Ireland in Easter, so I know that you definitely don't feel the cold over there, because honestly, it was absolutely freezing still. There was kids swimming in their Speedos and having a great time. It was like it was the middle of August or something. So
I know.
You guys definitely don't feel the cold.
I can't imagine doing it now.
Yeah. I think you just get used to having good wetsuits and stuff, don't you? It kind of spoils you a little bit, doesn't it? So you said about your brother. I actually hung out with your brother a bit in Bali about 14 years ago. So we had a little bit of a few days together in Kuta. Yeah, it was about 2007, I think. But were you guys pretty close? I mean, I obviously before I met Andrew, I had come across you at like various, pro tour events where there was a longboard division. So I knew of you, and then obviously I met your brother then in Bali. Yeah. Were you guys always close, or were you like inseparable as youngsters? Or
I think until we went to university, we were kind of inseparable. We went to university in Plymouth, and I went down a rabbit hole of like wanting to compete and wanting to be like on the pro tour and all that stuff. I was like literally into it. And Andrew wasn't so into it as me, so I think that was when we kind of went our separate ways a little bit. If you know what I mean?
And he lives in Australia now, doesn't he? Yeah, telling me.
Yeah, Andrew lives in Australia. He doesn't really like Northern Ireland for lots of reasons. Lives in Australia, has a kid, lives in Byron Bay, has a great life over there. So it's just I think we're very similar in a lot of ways, but also very chalk and cheese in a lot of ways. And my brother's a very good surfer as well. And it comes so naturally to him. I've always been the one that's had to work at it and train and do all these things. And he's a very good, just natural surfer.
I could never tell you guys apart in the beginning, and I was trying to work out when it was that I first met you. And the problem is I don't know whether it was you or Andrew that I met. So the first time I met Mennie was in the 1996 Junior Europeans in Santa Cruz near Lisbon. Yeah,
so that was my brother was on the team, the junior team, and I was there with my mum and dad just watching
so it
him.
Could have been either of you.
It could have been either of us, yeah. In fact, right. I remember in that contest, I was surfing up the beach and I got smashed. My board came out the back, it was smashed in the face, and I'm still scarred to this day.
From that trip.
Yeah.
It's a heavier wave, Santa Cruz. I was there not that long ago, and there's some serious, it picks up so much swell, and
bumpy.
Yeah, it's a proper wave, definitely.
So was Andrew in the 14s then? Was he under 14s for that?
At 14,
he must have been.
He must have been, yeah. Well, what age were you?
I was the under 16s, and it was
14.
Skanger Conwell and a guy called Martin Byrne. That you guys had in the 16s, because I had to surf against both of them.
That's a hell of a name, that is. What was it? Skanger?
Stephen. Well, it's Stephen, it is, isn't it? I think he does a trade or something. He's in he lives in Rossnola, I think, because I did come across him about the years are spanning now, aren't they? I think that was probably a decade or two later as well that I came across him in Rossnola. But he's memorable because of the name, Skanger. And so then you started competing as a junior yourself. So your brother was the first one in the Irish team, but then from there you got really into it, and it was through the student scene, wasn't it? The University of Ulster. Yeah. And then eventually coming over to Plymouth.
Yeah. So we started doing contests at 14, and he would have won boogie boarding and longboarding and everything. I was like the quarterfinal fucking guy for a long time, and then we wanted to progress, obviously, like as you do. So for anybody watching this, there's a big student contest, and it's called the British Universities. Is it called British Universities? I think it is.
Yeah, something like that.
Surf contest, something that's on every year, and it's massive. It's like one of the biggest contests in the world, I think, in terms of numbers. Yeah. And anyway, I was at the University of Ulster here, locally in Coleraine at the time. We all got in the minibus and we were going down, and I thought I probably did quite well in this. Knocked out in the first round. Literally knocked out in the first round, and I was like, oh my goodness. And then I think that literally lit my fire, and I was like, right, that's never happening again. And then the following year I moved over to Plymouth to go to university there, and the whole idea was to do the contest and do the British Pro Tour and all those, all that stuff. And that year I won the British Universities contest. But like, it's honestly, like, I know it's the standard, it's often said to be very low in that contest, but there's so many rounds, and if you're not on your game in every single heat, you can get knocked out, and that's just the way it goes. And that's true of every contest, that one included. And do you remember Nick Reed?
Yeah, that was his claim to fame, was winning the.
Yes, he beat me the next year.
Yeah,
I was in the final with you.
Were you?
Yeah.
What, did you come third then?
I came third, and there was some South African guy who came fourth.
Raging.
But my main memory of that contest, I remember the year before. I don't know if you remember this, but I think it was the first or second round, and it was Dan Mole Joel who fell in the first or second round, wasn't it? And then
was he not in my heat?
He might have. I think you knocked him out, and then I think everyone else was then like, "Oh yeah, good job, Al." But then also thinking like, "Right, now the rest of us can win." But then you went on to win it, so it's only fair that the guy that knocked the favourite out went on to win it. But the following year, then it was. I remember thinking in that final that you were the guy I needed to try and like keep an eye on. Because you'd won it the year before, and then I remember. Do you remember this? There was a naked streaker. Well, what other type of streaker is there? A streaker paddled out at the start of the final.
No.
And I remember you saying to him, "What are you doing? You're going to get hypothermia or something," because it was cold. It was like February, and this streaker goes, "I don't care, man. I just want to get in the mag." and then the final starts, and I'm like the whole time watching what you're doing, or not watching it too much because I'm trying to concentrate on my own game. And I'm thinking, right, that's what I got to beat. That's what I got to beat. And then, next thing I learn when we get to the beach is that this fella none of us had heard of before, Nick Reed, had won it. Yeah. And then obviously from there he goes on to become the legend that was Nick Reed.
That's it. I know, because I remember. Yeah. I'm sure you guys know the same thing, but I remember I ended that competition fully in the mindset of like, I had to defend my title. That's what I was thinking the whole time. I was like, I've got to defend my title. I've got to protect this. And then I just thinking about surfing, if you know what I mean, and focusing on my surfing. And then I get to the final, nightmare.
The waves were always notoriously bad for that event as well. I don't think I've ever surfed Cornwall as bad as I have for that contest. Always like small, northwesterly onshore, always freezing cold.
Did you do it as well then?
Yeah, I came third one. Yeah, that was my claim to fame on a shortboard.
Were you Swansea or Cardiff?
I was in Cardiff. Yeah. Cardiff? So I think James Hicks won it the year I came third.
Right.
Oh, it was a Jersey fellow.
Yeah, he wasn't. I think he was surfing for a university, even though he wasn't in a university at the time.
Now
it was a setup.
Yeah, he was a ring. He was a ring himself. I think
this brings me on nicely to this particular topic, because I think you do remember this one, Al. In fact, I think that was this anecdote was in between the two, but you were actually present for one of the anecdotes which I have had the most reader queries and comments over from the books that I've written. The West Wales contest. Do you remember this one, in which you and me and your brother, we all got smoked by mystery locals who they'd like seeded into the semis? Do you remember?
Mystery locals from Knowlton Haven.
Yeah. Did you ever do the Knowlton Haven one, Al?
Yes.
Knowlton Haven.
There used to be a Knowlton Haven one as well. So there were two. There was like a rival, like a Derek Hind rival tour setup, and it was the Knowlton Haven one. But it was basically like a kind of a plan to sort of get a load of students into the accommodation in the middle of the winter and to get them to sort of drink the place dry.
Yeah.
And so we went down there, me and Alan, his brother, and we were taking it pretty seriously. And a fella called Dan Newsom won that one. Do you remember him?
Oh, from Croyd.
Yeah.
That's right. I remember that.
But in the semis, you and I were both not. Well, you might have made the final. We were both knocked out. I thought it was me and your brother. We were beaten by some like mystery.
I'm pretty sure
longboarder
in the final. And am I correct? Was there not just like a prize for first, and nobody else got like even mentioned?
I think that's what happened. Yeah, and then there was some mystery. Couple of longboarders turned up at the last minute without jerseys on, and then sort of surfed a few meters down from where the heat was. And then when I came out, I saw one of them sort of punch in the air, and apparently he'd been sort of put in the heat at the last minute after having like escaped having to do the first 5 rounds or something. And the judges, now do you remember them? They were about 400 meters away from the shoreline as it was getting dark for the semis and final. And then I think on top of that, I think they were struggling to see through all the smoke that was billowing around inside their van as well.
What do you call that? Is it Little Britain? Little Britain.
Yeah,
that's kind of what it was like.
They were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you know, do you remember going, you know the way most of these contests, you have to register on the Friday night? And we had to register in the pub. And I remember going in.
I remember it.
It was like, it was just typical little small pub. But there was a guy playing pool in his rash vest.
I do remember. And then we were the last people to arrive, and we had to go and sleep in some freezing accommodation with like no central heating all night long.
Oh, so
freezing.
fine.
Yeah. Great days though. And then, of course, you were doing the BPSAs from there, which obviously were a little bit of a more organised affair, weren't they?
Yeah, I loved doing those as well. So that I remember they were all over. They were in Scotland. There was Thurso one. What do you call the place in the northeast? Scarborough. Was it Scarborough? It was amazing. They had some great surf for that one. There's not one in Mumbles as well. Or
yeah, there was one in Wales. Yeah,
there's probably one. There was one at Rest Bay maybe at one point, or was that a bit later?
Yeah. Do you remember the Red Bull local hero tour?
Yeah, I remember that in Llangennith, and they had that like army vehicle with the had like a DJ on the back, and it was like the most miserable day at Llangennith. There was no one around to see any of this stuff happening, other than the maybe like 10 or 15 surfers who'd been invited, and they were having like a kind of this really kind of weird party on the beach in this old kind of it was like a Humvee or something, wasn't it? With like they
had a Humvee, but they also had a big what do you call it, like a big coach, but it was all converted inside. It was apparently the Spice Girls coach,
right?
And
was it?
Yeah, and we were all.
You won your way onto the coach, didn't you? And then didn't you get to hang out with Gavin Besh and Justin Mattison?
They came up here.
Jay Larson.
Yeah, they came up here. It was the Besh brothers and Dino and all those Santa Cruz, guys. We would have seen in all the videos, and they came here, and I won the contest here, and then I went down to where was it? Bundoran or somewhere. There was 2 or 3 down here, and I won a couple of them. Then I had to go over to Wales, and I was competing against.
Well, I can tell you who won the Wales contest. You should know the answer to this by now, Al. We were all busy looking at each other and sizing each other up, and it was Nick Reed.
Nick Reed, that's who it was.
It was.
Well, if it was at Llangennith, literally that guy knows that place better.
And it was only after Nick Reed had beaten us all that they decided to announce that the prize was a trip to J Bay.
That's right.
To go and stay in Derek Hines' house.
Yes. That's it.
So
there's another guy. There was another guy who won from Wales.
Nick Swinnerton.
Was it Swinnerton? Yeah, Swinno. Yes. Yeah. So he won one of them as well. Yeah. I went to J Bay with him and Gareth Llewellyn.
Oh, okay. Nick Reed won it the year after then.
He was the one
the one you came to was in Langland. I remember now. Yeah. Derek Hind was judging, wasn't he?
And then there was another one as well. Was there not? J Bay. I won another one of those and went to Portugal.
That's the one Nick Reed went to.
That's the one Nick and I were on. Yes, that's right. Down in Lagos. Those are the days. Those are the days.
Well, the thing is, you just kind of like summed it up, really. Like nowadays, you go to a surf contest, especially a British one, and if you're lucky, you get kind of like a homemade trophy and a free T-shirt. Whereas there seemed to like actually be like real money around in those. Even the longboard contest, the minimum prize money was like 500 quid for first place, and we were like, oh, it's not fair. The shortboarders are getting more than us. Whereas now I'd be like 500 quid for a contest. I'd be like, I'd take that any day of the week.
Yeah.
They were just throwing money at these things. It was amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, our conversation kind of takes a little bit of a turn from there for the more somber, though, because then, sort of right in the middle of these great years, you moved home, didn't you?
Yeah. So all of us, like, all of this suddenly out of the blue, I get the phone call from like back home that my dad has just died, and basically all those days just came to a halt. And it's funny because at the time I didn't really think of it like that. I didn't really see it as those days were just going to stop. But I moved home and I dove headfirst into my dad's business, which I knew nothing about. Like, I literally didn't know anything about what he did. And so I left behind all those great times and all you guys that I met, and all those great experiences. But it wasn't until years later, because I was obviously down a rabbit hole of trying to run dad's business and all that stuff for a while. It wasn't until a wee bit later on that I realized I'd left so much good behind me over there. And I do miss it now. Like, I still do miss it today. Like, the whole scene over there, and that time in particular was a great part of my life. It was just cool. And do you remember as well, like, when we went down to the contest in France and Spain and all, and like all that just stopped as well. I had to just stop it. Do you know what I mean? I had to come home and focus on family and getting things sort of sorted out here. So but that's life. That's the way life is, And
it was kind of and looking back on it, like you say, I think the way surfing has become now, it's definitely a lot more serious. The contest side of it is everyone takes it way, way, way more seriously. It's much more of an investment now. Back then there was probably more sponsorship floating around, and to a certain extent, I'm sure all of us sort of pissed it up the wall a little bit. We were all like partying. I mean, I don't know about you, but you used to go to a contest, and part of the, especially if you won, it was the kind of the big party afterwards, and it seemed like it was definitely a more sociable thing. Whereas now it's very much like, everyone's in their kind of little zone with their kind of coach, say, and they've got their headphones on, and it's all very serious. I think back then it was like, I mean, it wasn't much. Maybe I'm just looking back with rose-tinted goggles, but it did seem like a more fun experience. There was more of a social aspect, perhaps, to it.
Good times.
How old were you when you kind of, like having to take on that kind of level of responsibility? How old were you when that happened?
I was 22. My dad died when he was 50, just literally very suddenly. I was 22, and my dad was a builder. He had to run a building company. So he had like big sites where he was building multiple housing developments on them.
Yeah.
And like, I had studied this in tech and university, whatever. That's not anything like a building site.
No.
You don't like literally a building site with guys who were 2 and a bit times older than me. And I had to walk on there and take over that. And it's funny because like same as I've done with so many other things, I go into them and I go in wholeheartedly, or I don't at all. I mean, I'm a very all or nothing kind of person. And back then I did that too. That's just what I did, and I didn't think about it. It wasn't like a conscious decision. Oh, I'm going to go wholeheartedly into this, but it's just what I did. It was some sort of survival mode. And do you know what? Those 4 or 5 years probably largely made me the man I am today. I experienced things that people at maybe my age and other walks of life didn't experience, and taught me a lot about people, a lot about the world, and a lot about myself and what I can handle. And and in a lot of ways, it at the time, and before my dad died, it was all about surfing. I was like, oh, I'm going to do this, I want to do that, I want to achieve things, I want to push myself. And it kind of makes all that sort of feel a little insignificant, if you know what I mean.
I do.
And I don't mean that disrespectfully to people who are good surfers and pushing themselves in the world of surfing. I don't mean that. I just mean that to me in my life, it sort of became a little insignificant, even though it shouldn't have. But it kind of did. You know what I mean?
I think there's a kind of beautiful irony to this, though, Al, because when you look back now, it is precisely because you had to sort of suddenly make all these life changes that, you know, the sort of second half of this conversation that we're having here now isn't, you know, and then in 2004 you were in the final and I was in the semis, and in 2005 it was me and the, you know, and it, you know, that kind of like routine, it changes. And I think actually what you have actually gone on to do in surfing is to find a very different path that will, you know, stand out and be remembered and inspire more people than I think most people would get to do through a contest jersey, because it wasn't long after I last saw you, you know, on the British mainland, that I saw that you'd gone to Mavericks, and you know, and I think that was a very special trip to you, and particularly kind of linked to Dad and his influence on you as well, wasn't it?
Yeah. So growing up here, I was obviously not obviously, but I was aware that we had these big waves here, and now you have to, for anyone, like, I'm sure there's a lot of people younger than us watching this or listening to this, big wave surfing didn't exist outside of Hawaii and California, really, and Jaws, you know, a few places around the world. So yeah, I saw these big waves off the coast here, and I was gradually surfing bigger waves all my life. And I remember specifically at the age of 13 sitting on the end of my brother's bed, and we had a VHS tape of a video called Monster Mavericks. Have you ever heard that or seen that?
I had the video Monster Mavericks.
94, I think. It was the one, it actually shows, unfortunately, where the day it shows Mark Fu. When he died.
Yeah.
It shows the wave.
Yeah.
It shows the wave, I think, doesn't it? Brock Little getting washed through.
To the point, I even remember the shop that I bought it from, because I was 9 years old at the time. I was stoked. There's a shop in St. David's called Marsymes, and I remember walking into town. We were camping, and I came back with this like VHS, and I was reading. I didn't have a VHS player in the camper van, so I was just reading it for like 2 days until I got home, reading the cover and looking at the pictures. And then I got home and played it, and it was like, oh, because you know, you didn't hear about Mark Fu's death until weeks or months afterwards when you saw it in the back. You know? So yeah, it was
and Jay Moriarty's famous he's in kind of floater takeoff.
Yeah, that's it. But that was the video. I remember sitting watching it, and I think Andrew was sleeping. And I remember saying the words, "I want to surf one of those big waves someday." And I don't know, because we had you know, the Momentum videos, we had all those as well. But there was something about, like, I just saw these guys at Mavericks as these big burly men, and they were on these big thick surfboards, and they're in wetsuits, and that kind of, to me as a little kid, kind of stood out more than the, you know, the sun-kissed Californian did, if you know what I mean. And it was always in my head, but I gradually surfed bigger and bigger waves, you know, so over the years, being in particular at Castle Rock where I live, if we have big swell, we've got lines and lines of whitewater. So I kind of grew up surfing through lots of whitewater and bigger waves. But back to my dad, day before my dad died, I was sitting in the garden with him. We're talking about me wanting to go to Mavericks. I wanted to go to Mavericks, obviously, since I was 13. And he was like, "Your mother's going to go mad. She'll not want you to do this. But, you know, I think you can do it. You know, if you put your mind to it, you'll do it." And literally the next day, my dad died, and that was the last conversation I had with him. And
you did it.
Yeah. So basically, like, and it wasn't like I'm doing this because I had this conversation with my dad. It wasn't that didn't really enter my mind. It was just I wanted to do this, if you know what I mean. And he died in July, and one of my friends from the West Coast here, Elliot Dudley, also keen on big waves, like he's surfed Chopu and various places. We said, right, we're going to do it. So we like blocked out a month at the end of the year to go to Mavericks in prime time, sort of big wave season. So I was like, all right, I better put the training in now. So I was like, out every time there was surf, big onshore, whatever, I was out. But we didn't really get any big swell for some reason that year. So I didn't really have the preparation I wanted to have. And I remember when we went there, I had got Circle One made me 6 boards, and like just weren't right. Like I didn't know, do you know what I mean? I didn't know what I really needed. Yeah. And we couldn't get those kind of boards back here then. And the Gerhardts, actually Sarah Gerhardt was the first female to ever surf Mavericks, and Mike Gerhardt was one of the sort of the originals there. He would have been there the day Mark Fu died. We stayed with them. They looked after us. But the thing was, like, as into it as I was, and like this is like my dream for years. It took like 3 weeks for it to break, and it was like 40 foot. It was gigantic, you know, like those big, massive, scary days you see at Mavericks. That's what it was. And I couldn't
Where
do
it
it.
starts to double up.
Yeah, but I couldn't do it. I froze up. And I was like sitting there like going, what is wrong with me? And I was like,
Well, I don't think there's a lot
No.
wrong with you if you can't go in 45
honestly,
Mavericks.
but I was just so angry with myself. And I went out there from first light till dark. They were actually calling me out of the water. Mike was telling me to get in. I was just so determined. I was the last person in the water and I couldn't get a wave. I was so angry with myself that night. And luckily, a few days later, we had another opportunity. And do you know what the thing was? And I've only realized this at the time, that despite being interested in big waves and pushing myself, throughout my teens, it wasn't until that point that I realized that you can't just get away with this. You can't just go out there and maybe get away with getting one on the edge of it, or sneaking onto them. If you want one, you have to want it, and you have to put yourself where you need to be. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get wave. You're going to get beaten too. And it's that it was that acceptance which made me then go back out, and I was able to ride it, and I surfed, and I caught lots of waves. But yeah, that was a big turning point in my life. At that point, from then I came home, and because I recognized that those waves existed here, but they just hadn't been surfed yet or seen yet. And I know a lot of the older guys here as well, and they were all like talking about. Do you know the guy Mike Campbell of Bonzer Brothers?
Oh yeah.
Sorry, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Well, he was actually the first person to ever surf Mullaghmore.
Really?
Yeah, in the 70s.
Oh wow.
Learn with the best, the WSF Surf School, here at Llangennith Beach, South Wales. Established in 1981, the Welsh Surfing Federation Surf School is the oldest surf school in Wales. We're a not-for-profit surf school where all profits go back to the Welsh Surfing Federation. Lessons run daily from 10 till 12 and 2 till 4 via appointment. All equipment is included. Expert tuition from our experienced instructors covers the basics through to onward coaching. You're in safe hands learning with the Welsh Surfing Federation Surf School.
So the Campbell brothers went to, one of the Campbell brothers went to Ireland in the 70s?
Just him.
Just him? Really?
Yeah, and one of my friends here, Johnny Vance, he knew him very well. And he said he had these I've actually seen pictures of it. He used to have these big, massive red guns, and he shipped them in from somewhere. Like, you want to see them? They're like, they must be like 12 foot long or something. They're gigantic. And he surfed Mullaghmore, paddled in Mullaghmore, and he said it was like a really sunny day, and not what I know Mullaghmore to be now. And he referred to it as like pipeline. He'd never seen anything like this outside of Hawaii. So anyway, I knew of these big waves that existed here, and I bought ocean charts, Admiralty charts, and I was like, right, I'm going to find waves like Mavericks here. So basically what I did was I looked at all the charts, and I tried to look at where I thought the swell would rise, and where it would make waves like Mavericks. Borrowed some money, bought a boat, and that's literally what I did. I went off around the coast in my boat. I tried to surf all these different waves all around the whole northwest here.
So when we say boat, are we talking kind of what are we talking, like a kind of Captain Pugwash style?
A wee rib,
right?
No, we rib. And so I bought it
with an anchor.
Huh?
With an anchor, obviously.
Oh, with an anchor, yeah. No, so my friend Gareth, he came with me, and he drove the boat, and I would surf, and it was crazy time. Like, I think back to it, like, it was so out there. Like, we were going out to places we didn't even know where the launch spots were. We didn't know where the slipways were. All we had was the charts and going off the coast, and we nearly lost the boat a couple of times. And it was a crazy time. It was amazing though, and it was long before jet skis. We didn't have jet skis or anything then. And from Mavericks, and the board I used at Mavericks in the end, that I bought off Mike Gerhardt, brought it back home, and I've modelled all my big wave boards since off that. It was a 10.0 Bob Pearson.
Oh yeah,
Pearson Arrow. I'm sure you've seen the longboards. They're amazing.
I mean, he's shaped kind of some of the most iconic.
One of the main Santa Cruz shapers.
So Jay Moriarty rode for him in that fame. Wow, all through his whole life, basically.
In fact, I've got the board the one I bought from Mike actually has a sticker on it, which was it's Jay. Whenever Jay died, they all got these stickers, and it's live like Jay or something. It says on it. Anyway, since then, I've literally modelled all my big wave boards off it. So like, I've gone down in size and I've gone way up in size. My biggest big wave board now is 14.2, believe it or not.
Wow.
14.
14.2. I know.
14.
See, basically, yourself, you can't get boards made. I think 11.3 is the biggest you can get in a CNC machine or thereabouts.
Yeah.
So what I did was my friend was starting to shape surfboards, and he copied a couple of my boards, just a short board and a paddleboard. Basically, what he did was we got an insulation company that does housing insulation, to blow these big, massive blanks. And now it's quite common today, I think, but back then this wasn't the norm. And we basically got the stringer, which is like a piece of skirting board, is that thick, and cut this big. We actually cut 4 16-foot blanks from it. So I still got 2 left.
Wow.
I've since made it. I've had a 14-foot 2 one made, and I've had a Mark II model, a slightly smaller, more respectable board made.
Slightly smaller, more respectable board.
Yeah. So the whole idea was that I would be able to go out into the open ocean. There's some spots I surf that are way out over sea mounts, and you need a big board because these waves are moving so fast. It's not like at the beach or reefs at the coast. This open ocean swell, and you need to have that momentum. So that's what those boards are for. But so anyway, yeah, my reason for that story was that that's where the Mavericks board took me to. It took me to being able to develop my own boards, and then as time went on, I realized in this part of the world we're exposed to so much wind, and it's very difficult to paddle. Like all those waves I was finding and surfing, I was paddling them all. And actually, that was the first time I ever had a little impact vest. Circle One made me it's kind of like a wakeboarder's vest, and this is a little slimline impact vest that I wore just in the eventuality that again I would hit a boat under the water, because we knew there was wrecks and stuff around the reefs we were surfing. So I was always conscious of safety. I was always on my own and thinking about what happens if this happens next, because I didn't have a backup or lifeguards or like we have nowadays, So yeah, then I for some reason I changed and sold the boat and bought a jet ski. And I think in hindsight, I know toe surfing has been really good for me. I've done a lot of stuff with it. I do wonder if that was the right decision to make at the time.
Right. Why is that?
Just like when you paddle big waves, right? And I don't want to sound like one of these guys. I'm a paddle guy, not the toe guy, because I do a bit of everything and sort of I'll do whatever it takes, kind of thing. But there's just something about those days where there was a rawness to it. And as soon as I introduced the jet ski to it, it meant I had to find another like-minded person, and that's not hard to come by in back here. Do you know what I mean? So. And I struggled. I've always struggled with people trying to get somebody to do it with me, and I do wonder if that was the right decision at the time.
It kind of it was a funny one because it looked like that was it. That was the end of paddle surf, didn't it?
Didn't it?
It looked like there was no way back, and then all of a sudden it was like Nathan Fletcher. I remember reading about him, and you talked about
boards,
a really big kind of like that 14-foot board that's almost like a paddle board.
He had this giant.
He was like
one,
the first one I saw really start to think about, how can we make these waves that supposedly only towable paddleable. And then once they'd gone to those big boards, they started kind of coming back down again, and you look at Kyle Lenny now is surfing waves that like were only towable 10 years ago on a like 9.6, and he's like ripping on it like it's a high performance longboard or a shortboard, It's like,
I know, it's crazy how it's all changed, isn't it?
I've almost become numb to toe surfing. I mean, it could be the waves could get bigger. I don't know how much bigger waves can get, but paddle side of it, that's like super exciting. That kind of seeing guys, with just their own steam getting into giant waves. Something kind of like you say, something raw about it. It's just them.
There is, but at the same time, like I think it's so true in this country, especially with the wind. There's tow waves and there's paddle waves, in my opinion. And like I know you can go out to Mullickmore and you can catch the odd wave paddling in, and the same at the Cliffs of Moher and various other places. But there's some days it's just better to be towed in.
Yeah,
it just is.
Right.
And you can surf better, and you can surf the wave deeper or whatever. And it's both. I think it's both. But I don't know. Like I really don't know where it can go next. It's almost saturated now. There's so many people doing it, towing and paddling, and I just don't know. I honestly don't know where it's going to go next.
Well, when we talked to Glyn back sort of last year, it was Glyn Evans. Yeah, he was saying about how there's almost kind of like kind of gun for hire thing, now where you get someone from a really obscure country that doesn't really have surf, and to be the first, Russian or something to surf Nazare, and that kind of takes, when you think like surfing was always something that you earned your stripes if you worked your way up, even if it was your local spot, and then you got to surf your local reef, and then you got to surf, the standout spot in your country, say. You kind of worked your way up. It was never a thing that you could just go to a totally different country, pay some dude to drive a jet ski, and you get to surf away. That was never a thing. Whereas, I don't know if I like, if I like the way that sort of side of surfing, really. But it's inevitable.
Yeah,
isn't
like,
it?
honestly, I think another thing that has changed as well is like you guys will be the same. Like whenever we were younger, there was always just a small crew of people, usually local, and everybody knew everybody. And now it's packed every day, everywhere. And I find myself over the last couple of years surfing more and more places that are further out of the way, often way worse quality than maybe miles up the road, just because that's what surfing really is to me. That's what I like about it. I don't necessarily want to be in biggest waves or the best waves and all that all the time. I like going surfing.
So I've got a question for you.
Huh?
Obviously you were kind of like sort of one of the pioneers of Nazare, and you've surfed it as big as it, well, bigger than I'd ever surf it, that's for sure. I was actually there in like that really big swell in October, and I'd never been there. That kind of swell that lit up, it was all over kind of.
Yeah.
And I kind of like, it really put me off the whole big wave scene. Not that I didn't respect the surfing necessarily, but it was this kind of weird festival atmosphere, There was like 10,000 people on the beach at Nazare. Turned up there. We just saw that there was waves there, so we were in the area. So we thought we'd check it out. And you get there, and it was like turning up to kind of like the Notting Hill Carnival or something. There was just people everywhere. It was crazy. Police directing traffic. Couldn't get a parking space. And then when you got there was like kind of an entrance to the bit where you walk down to watch the surf, and there was hot dog vans and beer tents, and it was honestly, it was so surreal. It was like I was like,
I'm horrified.
It was it was actually really.
It's a crazy experience.
Yeah, and then that's quite a recent thing. That obviously wasn't like it when you obviously started surfing there. But how do the guys that kind of involved in it, how do they feel about that side of it, or is it just that pays the bills?
I don't know. Like, but I don't know how everyone else is about it. But I experienced that first of all here in Ireland at Mullaghmore, believe it or not. So we were out at Mullaghmore, like. It was only ever local people, really, and there was never anybody around you. You had to phone somebody to come and watch you if you were going to surf out there. And then one
place was only famous for Lord Mountbatten before that.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
That's it. Who was blown up by the IRA? Like there was like there was no one around. But there was one day when that all changed, and it was December 1st, 2007, and it was the biggest recorded swell in the IRC at that time. And I think there's been bigger since, but at that time that was the biggest one. And biggest one ever measured wave boys. And my friend Duncan Scott, you probably remember Duncan from the BPSA Tour.
Yeah, South African.
South African. Yeah, so we towed, and it was gigantic. But that was the first day I remember seeing people on the headland. There was like a crepe van there. There was flags out, and before that there was never anybody there. But in Nazare, it was the same thing. In the early days, I remember like the lighthouse, for example. That's now. Were you in the lighthouse, Elliot? Did you go to it?
No, that was like cordoned off, VIPs only. Yeah, it was.
Like that was a ghost like building out of town. Dead end of town. No one went there ever. And the only people watching what we were doing was like the photographer that was with us, or Garrett's wife, or whatever. Wow. There was no one around.
And this is Garrett McNamara you're talking about here.
Yeah, this is Garrett McNamara. He's like a famous Hawaiian big wave surfer.
He was the first guy to pick up a world record at Nazare, wasn't he?
Yeah. So basically, what happened there was, Garrett was the locals in Nazare were trying to get somebody to go there and pioneer the big waves there, because it hadn't really been done. I think there's a fear that comes with Nazare because for generations it's been deadly in terms of the local community. It's taken lives and taking boats and various things, so there's been a fear around it. But the local guys believed that it was surfable. Eventually Garrett was the one that wanted to go and check it out, but he struggled to get people to go with him and want to do it for whatever reason. Probably maybe people didn't believe it or believe in it or whatever. Anyway, so long story short, I ended up on Skype to Garrett and going down there, and that's really where it all started from. And within the first year of that, he rode the biggest wave ever, and it's literally blown up since then. Like you guys know, like ordinary surfing doesn't hit the headlines of the newspapers. You don't get front covers with whoever wins the whatever local wave contest. Don't get that. But big wave surfing was getting mainstream coverage. We had it a bit here in Ireland. 2007, 2008, we got a lot of newspaper coverage and stuff, but this was a different level. All of a sudden, the biggest waves in the world weren't in Hawaii. They weren't in Mavericks. They weren't in Moor. They were in Portugal. And like you, Elliot, I've been to Portugal a lot. We used to have a holiday home there. We went there a lot, so I knew Portugal well. I was very aware of the West Coast and spent a lot of time there. But the biggest waves in the world weren't ridden in Portugal at that time. And it changed literally from that moment on. And now there's people based there from all over the world who some are very, very good big wave surfers, some not so. And it's incredible. Like that's in Europe, to be honest, so close to home.
It has shifted the balance of power, definitely, hasn't it? Because I think, prior to Nazare, you just always, it was Hawaii or California, like you say.
Yeah. And now people have got careers out of surfing that probably would never have had careers out of surfing.
Yeah. For sure.
Like you don't need to be like, I'm not the best surfer in the world by any means. Like you guys are better surfers than I am, but I can go to Nazare and surf some of the biggest waves in the world. You don't need to be that good. Do you know what I mean? To do it. But if you are good, then it's a different level. Like you look at Kaileni and Lucas Chumbo and Garrett and those guys, they are seriously good big wave surfers. And they stand out a lot when they're surfing there. They're very, very good. It's made careers for people that just probably wouldn't have ever had it. And that's another thing about Nazare in particular. I've never seen it. I've never seen somewhere in the world where the locals have embraced something in such like depth. Like the local council, Lisbon, the Nazare Council, all those guys are behind this. And when you go there, you need them there to help you do this because they put a tractor in the beach for when you lose your jet ski, which you will, and they do all this stuff on the land behind the scenes, which you don't get in other parts of the world. It's an incredible thing. They've really embraced it and they've turned it into. In fact, they're due as much credit as the surfers, in my opinion, for turning it into what it is in terms of the world stage for big wave surfing.
I noticed that in Portugal in general, though, they've really, really embraced surfing as a whole. They've made Ericeira like a world surfing reserve. And there's places up north where most kind of Brits or other Europeans have never heard of, but quite small kind of coastal towns, not even that touristy, that have got full on infrastructure for surf coaching, surfing centres, the kind of thing you'd only see at places like Bundoran or Newquay. They've got those all up the coast, so I think they are really looking at surfing as kind of a new sport, a new national sport, and that's like that. Most of that is probably down to the publicity of Nazare, which obviously you were involved in at the early stages.
Yeah, it's incredible what they've done with it, and I honestly don't know where it's going to go from here. Like you could pretty much, I think, if you were to spend every season there, you could be the one that rides the biggest wave in the world at some point. It's that big that often. Yeah. It's incredible. Yeah. But I just don't know where it can go from here in terms of like the likes of Kaileni and Lucas Chumbos of the world. Yeah. What are they going to do next?
It's probably about doing maneuvers on those waves, isn't it?
Whereas one of them, my day was like, get up and stay on your surfboard, make it to the end.
Yeah.
So like obviously your kind of shift into big wave surfing, there was I presume you've always probably been a fit guy. Did the kind of cross training, the paddling, that kind of thing, did that start with the big waves, or did that like precede all that kind of stuff, or was that done specifically for it?
No, so I've always been like, for some, I don't know why, I always trained for surfing. Like I had since I was a kid, I always had a little gym set up in my spare room. Like even before I moved over to Plymouth, I would have so I worked a 9 to 5 when I moved over there, and I would have surfed in the morning. Even if it was dark, I would have gone out surfing, and then I would have surfed at lunchtime in my hour for 20 minutes and driven back soaking wet, and then in the evening I would have done weights. And that's just what I did since I was about 16. I wasn't allowed to do weights until I was 16, so I didn't touch those till I was that age. But I've always been like that. Like I'm sure I was the most boring kid because like I didn't drink, I didn't eat sweets, I didn't eat chocolate. I was like on a mission, and and that's just the way I was. And whenever I moved to Plymouth, it was the same thing. And I did like all sorts of like I read all the psychology books and sports psychology and subliminal tapes and everything I could. I was on a bit of a mission. So then when it came to the big wave thing, I suppose it was just adapting to that. The funny thing was, I actually sent an email to Laird Hamilton, and I asked him because I'm a big guy. I'm 6'5", like 17.5 stone. And I wasn't that big back then, but I was relatively big for a surfer. And so he was a big guy, so I thought, right, I'll ask him what surfboard to get for for surfing big waves, what toe board to get and stuff, what exercises to do and training. But he didn't actually get back to me.
But I'm surprised he didn't say buy my book, because that's the kind of thing that I'd imagine he would do.
Maybe so, but he didn't actually get back to me. And another guy called Eric Akaskelian, who was another American big wave surfer. But he got back to me and told me, what board to get. But it was literally just a one line, 6.0 by whatever it was. And I said, right, no help.
Yeah.
So I was like looking up, trying to find, how do you train for big wave surfing? So like back then, you assume, you have to be a good swimmer. So I started swimming 1 kilometre every night. So I would swim 1 kilometre, and then at the weekends I would swim 1 kilometre and run back to the sand dunes. And that was my training. But then as the years went on, I realised that the swimming aspect of it and the running in the sand dunes aspect of survival and big surf is actually irrelevant. You need to train specifically, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But only through my experience of big wave surfing and what it does to you and how you feel mentally and physically and the sort of elements that impact you, that I then know what I needed to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my friend, he was a world champion bodybuilder, a natural bodybuilder. So like natural bodybuilder is somebody who doesn't use any supplements, in terms of enhancement.
Yeah.
So he was very good. He came on board, and he's also got a bit of a sea background, so he was able to help me and train me specifically for big waves. So we had like an on-season and an off-season training plan. And if I was focusing more on toe surfing, I would do this, and if I was focusing more on paddle surfing, I'd do that, and did some underwater breath work and various things. But yeah, basically, as years went on, I learned more what I needed to do, and I adapted everything for that. And the more serious it got, bigger and crazier the waves got, the more intense my training would get. Like I got to the point where I was wearing, like, I haven't worn this in a long time now, but I was wearing 3 impact vests. I was wearing 2, one slim one, which I would use when paddling. I would wear another one over the top for biggish waves, and then I actually got a rash vest, and I stitched into it foam all around the chest and upper body, so I had a third for really big conditions. So you just adapted as I went, if you know what I mean. But nowadays you can Google everything and you can find what such and such does to train.
Yeah.
I didn't have that back then, so I just did what I could be fit. And I was always of the mind of, what if something happens to me? What about mum? Dad's not here anymore.
Yeah.
What about mum? What's going to happen then? So I was always really, really OTT in preparation of training. And I was doing this, there was always like 1 or 2 of us. There wasn't teams of backup jet skis and everything. So, and my back of my mind, I was always like, right, what about mum? What happens if? So I was always over the top in a lot of people's eyes, probably, in what I did to be safe.
Do you look back though and think, when you look at the way big wave surfing's developed now, and there's these kind of forums on best practice, and it's so developed, isn't it? The safety side of it. You look back, and even though you were super prepared, look back and think, God, we were actually really naive.
Oh, honestly, I've thought that so many times, Elliot. Like, for example, at the start, whenever I had the first jet ski, so when I had the boat, I only had the boat, and I had my guns and whatever in it. But when I got onto toe surfing and I had a jet ski, I had no rescue sled. A rescue sled goes in the back of the jet ski, and it's what we pick up a surfer who's maybe fallen, possibly injured, and possibly, worst case scenario, unconscious. We didn't have that. I tried to convert a knee board that I used to use behind the boat into a rescue sled, and I had a water ski rope which didn't float. Nowadays we all have these floating ropes which don't get pulled into the jet ski, and they float in the surface, so you can always see them. Didn't have any of that. And I was
so some of these bits of equipment might have actually been like worse than nothing.
That definitely
got you into more trouble.
The knee board was a nightmare. I just ended up, I couldn't use it. But some of the trips I was going on from, like, in order to toe surf at the cliffs of Moher, the wave called Aliens, you have to launch your jet ski from a place called Doolan. Well, in most conditions you launch Doolan. If it's really big, you could launch somewhere else. But
that's just up to the north, isn't it?
Just to the north, yeah. But it takes, depending on the sea state, it takes anywhere from about 5 or 10 minutes to maybe 20 minutes to get there. I was doing that with one jet ski. No backup engine. And I hadn't even really considered it. I just thought that my backup plan was always like, if I have to ditch the jet ski, what am I going to do? And I was always of the mind of, like, I'm taking these risks. I need to be able to get myself back to shore at all times. So I was always like, if I do this, I have to be able to swim to shore. So I was always thinking along the lines of, okay, for example, if I was looking at a wave off North Donegal, for example. There's one there I surfed in particular, and at the time I couldn't find any slipways to it, but I needed to have backup exit points if something went wrong. So if I'm out there and I'm surfing and something goes wrong, we lose the boat or whatever, how am I going to get back to shore? So I had to know various points around different parts of the coast that I could get to in various sea states. Whereas nowadays you've got 2 or 3 guys in jet skis, so
someone's going to fetch you.
Backup. But yeah, so basically as time went on, it's become far more professional, and most people are out there with at least one jet ski and possibly another. It's all very safety conscious, and there's do this and do that. But it's funny because I've actually now gone the opposite way, and I don't know why, but I prefer surfing without all that stuff. I prefer no engines, and I paddle way off coast now on my own. I often don't wear a life jacket anymore. I just think it became so much faff. And things as well, for me doing this here, I was always the one that had to fix the trailer, fix the jet ski, something wrong with the engine, I've got to do it. I had to do everything all the time, if you know what I mean. And not that I don't want this to sound like I hate doing that and everything, but that took a lot of energy. And there's something really good about not having to think about a trailer, the bearings and the wheel coming off the trailer, which does happen in the middle of the night. In the middle of the night, glare, and you lose both wheels of the jet ski trailer. You're in the dark trying to put it all back together. There's something beautiful about just traveling with your surfboard and your wetsuit and going surfing.
Yeah.
At this moment in my life, that's where I am with it. If you know what I mean. I've kind of had my time with engines for now.
The more you've got going on in your life, the simpler you want surfing to be. I find when I'm super busy with work and stress, you don't want to go on a mission. Like there's probably spots at 2 hours away you could drive to, and but sometimes you just want to go and walk to your local beach and have a quiet surf and surf for 2 hours and not have to rush around.
And I love now, and I have done for the last sort of 10 years, and I love paddleboarding. I in the surf, I love surfing on my paddleboard, and I know so many people are like, oh, paddleboard, whatever. I don't care. I love doing it. It's great. Yeah. And it's great training for big wave surfing. Like there's nothing better in my mind than if you go out on a 9.0 paddleboard, small paddleboard, and you're ripping around the surf, you don't wear a leash, you lose it, and you swim after it. Your fitness and your water knowledge from swimming after your board, gathering up the big board again, getting yourself back out, that's a great training regime for surfing in big waves, because you're used to handling a big board. You're used to not having a board. You're used to losing it. That's one of the things I love about paddleboarding. That's perfect cross training in my opinion.
And you've done that over some pretty big distances as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I also did. I paddled between the Giant's Causeway, which is like on the north coast here, and the Scottish island of Islay. I did that to raise money for Northern Ireland chest, heart and stroke, just after it was in memory of my dad, because he died of heart attack. So I paddled a paddleboard from here to that island. Yeah, and again, I trained like that. I trained for that really hard. I made it as difficult as I could for myself, within reason. I did it. I set the window to do it in the winter. I ended up doing it in March. And if anybody knows the North Channel here, it can be wild. It's where the Irish Sea drains and the Atlantic fills, and they clash together. And that's basically where I paddled across. So yeah, I love paddleboarding too. I just, do you know what? See, recently with the whole swimming thing as well, I realized that I used to think I loved surfing, and it's not that I love surfing. I love it all. If you know what I mean? I love surfing and paddleboarding and big wave surfing and tow surfing and fishing and rowing, and
it's that contact with the sea, though. I think, isn't it? I'm the same. I kind of if I'm not surfing, I want to be like I do a lot of prone paddling, or I want to be spear fishing, or it's just a day in the sea is never a day wasted, no matter what you do.
That's it. That's it. Yeah, I love that, and I've become less about I go on loads of trips down the west coast here in big swells. I don't bring a photographer. I don't bring a film crew. I'm not. It became almost too much, all that stuff for a while.
One of the things I didn't know, Al, obviously I've sort of followed your career over the years, was in terms of martial arts, is that something that you've always done, or is that something that you sort of did when you were younger and kind of got back into?
I was interested in karate when I was younger, and I started. Do you do martial arts now? Do you too now?
I did Aikido for a little bit.
Did you? Cool. Like belts and stuff?
No, I started doing it, and I kind of got into boxing as well at the same time. And
Oh, you're too good looking for boxing.
Yeah, wow.
I've done a bit of boxing as well, actually. Yeah, and I actually considered that pretty much to be the most physically exerting type of training.
Yeah,
I've
that
ever
was
done,
what
I would
appealed
say.
to me. Actually, I'm a little bit like you, Al.
Yeah.
Like I've always trained, and I can't sit still. And
Right.
and I love pushing myself. You know, like I've done Ironmans. Like to me, there's like I just want the next challenge. You know, and boxing was like Tom said, it's probably one of the hardest things I've ever done.
Right.
Yeah.
I stopped though because they kept wanting me to have a fight, and I didn't want to do that.
Oh man,
I just wanted to train. And the boxing club could not stand the idea that they were like, "You're here boxing because you want to be fitter to go surfing." And at that point, then I realised,
they struggled with that as well, as they didn't really know what surfing was, to be honest.
Yeah,
that's the same as me. I used to play rugby in school, and my rugby coach was like, "You're stopping playing rugby to do what?"
Yeah, that was me in year 9. Exactly that.
That's exactly that. And they actually, the headmaster.
You want to stop being the second row and go and do what?
Second row as well.
Yeah.
And they let me stop rugby, stop all PE, and just swim in all the PE classes because of my surfing. But
That's
the rugby
brilliant.
coach is raging.
That's really nice of them, actually. Yeah, God, that would have been cool. That would have.
So the martial arts thing.
Yeah. So
then.
So I did karate when I was 11, and it's kind of similar to you in that the first fight that came along, it wasn't a grading or anything. It was just the first time we were doing like a one-on-one thing. I don't know if I really understood. Do you know in karate, like it's very structured, and we were marching up and down the hall doing like this particular move, right? That's all we did for weeks and weeks, and that's kind of what I expected. So anyway, I'm put in this corner with this wee kid, and I remember Mum and Dad are standing on the other side of the class watching, and so we start to fight. But then I do the same move that we've been doing for weeks. Of course, the wee fella just beats me. But so I didn't know. I don't think I understood what to do. But I did it for about a year, I think, then, and then I wanted to do jiu-jitsu, but I ended up just surfing took over. Like I'm sure you guys too, surfing took over, and that became my focus. But it was about 2008. I started this class, and I'm not a class person. I don't go to classes. I just don't do that. So I just haven't done that ever. And I went to this class, which was called Krav Maga. And it's an Israeli fighting system that comes from the Israeli army, and it's become very popular, to be honest. In the last sort of 10 years, it's become very, very popular, and there's all sorts of different systems, whatever. But
because it's all about like hand movement, isn't it, Krav Maga?
Yeah, well, it's about like but a lot of martial arts are about using your opponent's momentum against them almost. But that's sort of the basis of a lot of it. But yeah, like I went to a class once. I was always of the mind, like whenever I grew up, if anything hinders my ability to go surfing, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
Right? So pretty much anything, I wouldn't do it. Right?
Amen to that. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So there was one winter I went snowboarding, which I was never going to do in my life until I stopped surfing. But I went, and then I think it was the same year I decided to go and start Krav Maga. Anyway, went once, and then I was like, right, I'll leave this till after winter because I can't risk like getting hurt in Krav Maga and not be able to surf in the winter. So I left for 6 months, and then I went back, and I went back every single week. It was Belfast. Every single week on the Tuesday night for an hour and a half. I did it for like years training. And I think it's probably the same to you guys, but like adapting from surfing to most other sports is relatively easy whenever you know how your body works. Do you know what I mean? And you know how your body moves. And so I picked up Krav Maga pretty quickly, and I became an instructor. And then I did another system, and long story short, in the middle of all that, I've now reached a 3rd degree black belt. It's that whole thing is as important to me as surfing is to me. I found it to be a really good thing to be involved in and to do. You learn so much confidence and avoiding all sorts of scenarios that maybe some other walk of my life I might have walked into those environments, if you know what I mean. Yeah, it's been a really good thing for me to do, and I've actually then taken it, and I used to run a weekly class here locally with mostly women, but I found that what I really wanted to do was look after kids who have been bullied or being bullied, and that's been the thing that's sort of, there's been a few people who've actually brought their kid to me who's going through something, and I get one of my black belt students down who sadly is now gone as well, but we would have taught the kid a few basic things and how to avoid scenarios and we're not about fighting. That's the thing. We're not about fighting, and we always try to avoid the whole fighting aspect of it. We teach them like avoidance and awareness in rooms and awareness outside, and different things like that. So that's what I sort of got into, and doing some stuff with women as well. But yeah, I think just whenever I lost my dad, I realized the vulnerability that people have when they don't have a parent growing up, or their parent isn't around, or whatever it is. So I started to really look at doing something to give back to that, to give back to those kind of people. Because I know what it was like to not have a father. Like, I know 22 isn't the youngest to lose your dad, but for what I took on, what I had to go through, not having that guidance there was very significant in my life. And I hate the thought of someone else having to go through that. So I do whatever I can for people now.
And you've done bodyguard work as well?
Yeah, I've done some bodyguard work too. Mostly high net worth individuals.
Right.
Looking after them. Some other people in the bodyguard world would refer to it as handbagging. Or minding. So yeah, I've done a bit of that as well. Yeah, high net worth individuals, business owners. I did witness protection as well for a bit with somebody. So yeah, I've done a few things.
Pretty diverse skill set, Al. And then I don't know whether this is the sort of like cherry on it, or whether this is kind of I don't know. Actually, I don't actually know what the opposite to a cherry on something is. But stunt double.
I know.
Now, producer Dodd was very excited because he was telling me that you'd been on Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
But it was for.
Yeah, he's actually told everyone in fourth ball that.
Oh no!
He has. Yeah, he's been telling everyone all day today.
he's gonna got it.
Because actually, it's the actor who plays Tormund Giantsbane.
Yes.
Christopher Hivju.
Yeah.
But you were his stunt double for something else, was it?
Yeah. So there's an actor called Christopher Hivju. He's very famous in Game of Thrones, and I happen to look really like him. Right, to the point where do you know what? Actually, just thinking about it, it hasn't happened so much recently because it's been because of lockdown, obviously, and I'm wearing a mask a lot of the time. But usually, I can spot people who are looking at me going, "That's Tormund."
Is it him?
And then within seconds, they've got their phone out and they're googling Tormund, and they're looking over to see is that Tormund. And I before lockdown, like I'm talking, this happened multiple times a day. Restaurant, like I got to the point I didn't even want to go to restaurants. I hated going to airports. It was a nightmare going to airports because you get stag do's in Belfast International Airport, for example, and I walk in and they're like, "There's Tormund." So then I'm like tormented with that. But yeah, it got really bad for a while in terms of people like thinking I was him. To the point I was like,
so what did you? Huh? Oh, sorry, I was going to say what did you have to do as him?
So basically, what happened was he was here filming Game of Thrones, literally like a few miles along the coast, and they had a driver. Him and his wife were in the back of the car, and the driver said, "Oh, you look like a guy I know." And they were like, "Oh, right." And he was, "No, I'm serious. Like, where do you see this?" And he opened up my Instagram and showed them in the back of the car, and they were like, "Oh my god, we have to get him." And they contacted. There's a woman who looks after some of my stuff for me, and they contacted her and said, like, we're filming a TV show in Norway, and it's about two twins. Christopher's playing them both, but one of them's a surfer. And Tracy, the woman who looks after my stuff, was like, "You're making this up. Like you must have written this knowing that Al looks like you." And they were like, "No, this is just pure chance." So random. So as random as you like. Next thing, he follows me on Instagram, and I was like, "What? This is real." And then his wife messages me and all, and then we end up. I end up going to Norway and filming this show called Twin, and it's about twins. One murders the other, and I do the surfing scenes and the rescue and a few other things in it. But it's so funny whenever we arrived because they were driving me in from the airport and they were filming a shot just off the side of the road as I drove in, and he was acting, and all the crew were sitting there just in their chairs with their blackguards, whatever, or their clipboards, whatever. And as I drove past, I just looked at the window and I saw them all like this, because obviously this is the first time they'd actually seen me in real life. And then he comes up to me and he's like, "It's the cheekbones, man. It's the cheekbones." And I'm like, honestly, this part of her face is just identical. He's a little smaller than me. I think he's 6'1", I'm 6'5". Yeah. But it's cool. It's pretty funny. So
that's amazing.
Yeah. So
do you say one of the twins in that movie kills the other one though?
Yeah.
That's the plot. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's quite a literary plot. That's like the kind of, but it's referred to in Hamlet as the primal elder's curse, a reference to either Cain and Abel from the Bible or Romulus and Remus. The twins who Romulus killed Remus and then suckled on a she-wolf and then founded Rome. That's why Rome is called Rome, because of Romulus and Remus.
That's deep, Tom. That's deep. For a surfing podcast.
This is because we are going deep. This is because we are going deep. Because Al, you are also a writer, and you're pretty prolific as a writer, really, aren't you? And you vary what you do as well, don't you? You've done fiction, you've done kids, you've done biography, philosophy.
Yeah, well, funny thing is, right, I'm not a reader, right? So I don't really read books. In fact, I don't read at all. I just look for information if I need it. So I'm not a book reader. So I don't actually know if I'm a very good writer, to be honest. but I can
other
type
than the people buy them.
And I'm typing them really fast.
Yeah.
I don't know how good the words are. But yeah, no, I've written, I think I've written 5 books now. To be honest, I've written probably a lot more that I just haven't together. I've always been a writer. Like since I was a kid, I always I wrote every night. Something in my bedroom. I always wrote something. And I think 2010 or 2008 was the first one I wrote. With I actually makes me cringe. I didn't even talk about it. It's do you not find that the more stuff you write, the worse the first ones seem to be?
Well, you have to. I've heard a great analogy for this, that they're like kids, and like there comes a point where your kid grows up and goes off into the world, and if the kid doesn't become a character that you're particularly proud of, then never mind. They're out there, and that's it. But I definitely know the feeling. I know what you're getting at there for sure. Yeah,
it's weird. And then I've written most recently I've written the story of basically what we've been talking about, from surfing early on to, the big wave stuff. Mostly focused on the big wave stuff. And then I've written a kid's book, which it's again is kind of based around, it is based around the kid loses his dad. And it's basically, it's like a book that you could hand to a kid or a teenager, and it has rules to live by, and it's guidance for somebody who doesn't have guidance. That makes sense. Yeah. I've written another one about bereavement, all this heavy shit. I've written one about bereavement, which again is about losing a father, but again, it sort of has in it the advice my dad gave me, that I would hope that somebody who's lost their father could lift and go, oh, right, these things I must try and maintain these in my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Hamlet could have actually done with you then. Because that's his main problem.
Is it?
Yeah, that's where it all kicks off. There would be no to be or not to be if he'd been able to read your stuff.
Did he lose his father?
He did.
See, do you know what? I honestly believe if you lose your father at a young age, it impacts you so much, and I don't think you realize it till you're older.
Wow. Yeah.
I honestly believe it. Yeah. I think I don't know if. I don't know. Anyway. Yeah, I do. I think it's a very, very significant point in time, and so I've written about it quite a lot. And I also wrote about this one. This is an interesting one. I wrote about written a book called Overcome or Succumb, which is based on overcoming fear and anxiety. And basically, this came about because a paramedic that whenever I surf these big waves, I used to always bring a paramedic with me. I don't do it so often now, but this paramedic came along with me, and we were driving in the dark one morning somewhere off the West Coast, and he said, do you know, you really do understand fear and anxiety? And he said most of his calls as a paramedic are based around mental health or that sort of thing.
Really?
And I was like, yeah, right enough. I suppose I do. Because my whole big wave background was like a self-sufficient big wave surfer, where I was always prepared for the worst case scenario and dealing with it myself. So I was always, dealing with all these things and all these eventualities and the anxiety of that before the big days. So that's what I wrote the book about. And I try to help people based on my own experience of those big, swells and like the 100-foot Nazare and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Yes, I've written about that too. So I've done a wee bit of everything. But as I said, that doesn't mean they're any good. I've just written lots of words.
Yeah. I mean, that's something that you've kind of, with the swim through darkness, that kind of dealing with depression. I think obviously it's almost inadvertently preempted the situation, that we're in at the moment, really, where loads of people are struggling with depression because of the global situation. Perhaps, sort of small issues have become.
So it's a silent pandemic,
it's
really,
something
isn't
that's
it?
we are hearing a lot about, but not necessarily enough's being done. The swim through darkness, you mentioned, you've already mentioned it, is the kind of link with depression. What was the motivation for that side of it?
Do you know, the main thing with the swim through darkness thing was that I heard on the news that the charities were struggling. They weren't getting donations in. And I thought to myself, right, if they can't help people because they haven't got the money, they were closing down offices and stuff. If they can't help people, then I can demonstrate. I felt that I could demonstrate that we can all help ourselves, even in the darkest of moments. And there's been various points in my life I felt like that myself. Yeah, and that's basically what it was about, to promote getting outside into the fresh air, doing exercise outside, continually swimming through the darkness against currents, against waves you can't see coming, just persevering to get the distance done and chip away at the bigger problems or whatever it is and get through. That was really my motivation for it. And to be honest, I just didn't really know how it would be received in terms of, what impact it would make. But it's been incredible because people have donated £17,000 so far. Like, I to be honest, I actually thought, setting a monetary value during the pandemic was a bit, I don't know what the word is, but I felt uneasy doing it. I didn't know what was appropriate. So I set a target of £3,000. And it just kept going and kept going. And then I started getting messages from people saying how much the thing was helping them. And it was incredible. Yeah. And it actually gave me a real boost then, because I was going out there on my own. In fact, for the first 27 kilometres, I did them all on my own, dark, in December. I didn't tell anybody to come down and look after me or anything. I just did it on my own. And once I started put it out there, the support really helped me then. You know what I mean?
It is fear part of the sensation, or do you get used to it?
No, absolutely. Because the funny thing is, yes, it's dark, but to be honest, I had to walk, 2 or 3 kilometres up the beach some nights to get upstream of currents if there was a steady current. I don't know if you've ever walked a beach in the middle of the night in the dark. Even that's intimidating, let alone going into the sea in the dark. You always wonder what is in the dark. Is there somebody there? Is someone going to attack me? Or you always wonder. So then to go into the sea, and some nights it was pitch black. There's no moon. There's no like ambient light. There's nothing. And then other nights there's really a big moon, and there is a bit of light. And so just like life, sometimes there's really bad times, sometimes really good times. There's everything in between. But yeah, it is concerning. And there was a couple of times where rips took me way out, and it crossed my mind for a minute, like, what happens if I can't get back in? I'm going to swim way up the beach. But I was always thinking, surfing, like, where are you going to go if X, Y, or Z happens? So yeah, there is fear, but of course,
going out to sea at night, is something that people in their darkest moments have chosen to do as the way out, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can see how that could happen. Yeah, it is. It's to be in that state of mind would not be nice for anybody.
And is I've always found with sea swimming that, sort of if you get the water under about 12 degrees, it can be very painful, on the face and the head as well. And was there a kind of a sort of masochistic, kind of like a pain element to it as well? Or did you have good enough wetsuit equipment?
No, it wasn't. It's funny. I said this, the girl, Laura, the paramedic, was with me. I said to her the other night, because I've been doing it a bit since. And it's funny, like, I felt cold the other night. But during the swim, like at the start of February, there was sometimes the river on the beach was frozen solid. Like absolutely frozen solid. The beach was slippy. It was that cold. But I swam every night with no gloves. It was just like I'd set my mind to it. I was doing it, and there was like nothing to stop me. If you know what I mean? But now that I can make the choice, I think I'm starting to notice, little things that might put me off. Like, oh, my hands are cold. I'm gonna do it tonight, or do you know what I mean? So, no, that wasn't the thing. I was on a mission, and I was like, as soon as I entered the water, I was like, right, where's the current going? Is there a current? And usually what I did was just so from a technical point of view, what I did was I would walk out across the sandbank until it got deeper, and there would be an inside break normally, and then there would be another deeper sort of hollow between the next bank. So I usually swam in that sort of zone, and if it was big surf, that zone got washed through. and I was getting pushed in up the beach, back out, with currents. And then if the surf wasn't too big, they would break into the side bank, wash into the deeper hole, and then reform, break again. But I had that gully to swim through, so that's kind of where I swam. And in those gullies, obviously, you get currents with you, against you, grips crossing them. So that was all in the dark. So quite an intimidating thing to do. And I did get used to it, but at the same time, you're in the sea, and there's always a danger element to it.
I guess it's that thing of in life, really. The analogy I can think of is, there are always things that you can't plan for. But having, being a surfer and having that, what you plan it before, which way the currents are going. So you can only, it kind of teaches you that you've got to do as much planning as possible. You can only do so much. If you deal with stress and anxiety, then that's something you have to sort of accept, I guess, isn't it?
That's it, exactly. And that's what in my book, Overcomers to Come, that's what I talk about in terms of big wave surfing and yes, the swim as well. The best way to deal with fear and anxiety in advance is to split everything into elements you can control and elements you can't control. You deal with everything in advance. So for you, as a longboarder going into contest, you're going to deal with all your equipment in all conditions. You're going to know the location. You're going to know how you behave in different conditions and blah, 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 blah. But what you can't control, you can't do anything about. You can't control your competitors, and people usually are the biggest element I find which you can't control, and they lead to the most anxiety. So basically, I always say to people, try and control as many elements as you can in advance, and then you have to roll with the ones that you can't control, and you become more confident because you've dealt with things in advance. You've more energy to deal with stuff which might come out of the dark at you, and that's the same in the swim. I dealt with as much as I could in advance, set up. If this happens, do this, and if that happens, do that, and that makes it easier then on the day, doesn't it?
And I like that metaphor there of, control what can come, you can't control what might come out of the dark at you. I think it's a really poignant idea.
Yeah.
And
go back a year to now, we were sitting at the start of the pandemic. None of us knew this was coming. The leaders of the world didn't know. Us didn't know. It all came out of the dark at us. But we all still, to this day, are still swimming. Regardless of what happened, we're still trying to keep going.
We are. Al, I want to thank you for such insight and for your wisdom. And I have to say, you're talking about reaching an age that starts with 4, and already what a life. Your father is proud, I'm sure, as is the rest of Ireland, and indeed Europe, the world. And I'm going to say here that if any of our listeners have been affected by any of the contents, then we recommend reaching out to, there's Aware NI, which of course, Al has promoted and raised money for. And if you're in mainland UK countries, then we recommend reaching out to the Samaritans. I have to say, I'm completely blown away by the tales that you've shared there, Al. And we got to take a moment to do a little bit of promotion for you here now. So firstly, there's the B&B. I'm coming, I promise you. I don't know if I might be round the corner in an Airbnb. So what is the B&B?
So we call it the Surfer's House.
The Surfer's House,
and it's in Portrush on the north coast.
Portrush, and then of course there's the books, which we can find.
Where? The best thing to do is just go onto my website. My website is called almennie.com, and it has everything there. All the books are there.
Almennie.com. And that includes the clothing as well.
Yeah, so I've also got a brand I've just started called manofthesea.ireland.com. Man of the Sea Ireland. Yeah, so you can see that too. And
okay.
Yeah, and there's actually donations from the products and that go to Aware, the mental health charity in Northern Ireland.
Okay.
And some of the Wave Project is one of them as well. So yeah, give back in that.
Okay. Oh, great. Yeah, great. Deserving enterprises and organisations there. Yeah, I'm coming. I promise you. And of course, that the red carpet is going to get rolled out here in Wales.
I'm going to Wales next June. I'm doing a talk.
Well, there we are then.
I'm doing a talk in Pembroke.
June 2021 or June 2022?
22.
Oh, cool.
Right. Oh well, we'll show up there.
Yeah,
we'll do a Crest follow up.
Yeah, it'll be class. Yeah, definitely.
I'll take you paddleboarding and spearfishing. I got some good spots.
Yeah, because then I don't have to bring my boards. Yeah, you bring them for me. Yeah, class.
For sure. That's good.
Thinking of the important stuff. Yeah, and so red carpet in Wales. Yeah, and that makes me think. we were talking literature, we've covered Hamlet. It makes me think of one of the tales from the Mabinogi, which is Wales's kind of, Bible of folklore. And there's a tale of the great giant who wades over the Irish Sea. I don't know if that's quite within your skill set yet, but I'm sure you're working on it.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, it was really interesting to talk to you, Alf. Yeah,
you too.
You sort of speak with such passion about everything you do, and you're definitely a credit to surfing, not just Irish surfing, but to surfing in general. Good to speak to someone who's so articulate and passionate about what they do.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'd like to obviously thank our listeners and remind you that if you haven't already subscribed to Crest in partnership with Elusive, then now is as good a time as any. You'll find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify. And while you're there, do please leave a review. Listener feedback is everything to us. And to that end, we can also be contacted via our email, pastcrest@gmail.com, as well as through Instagram, where you could follow us to get up-to-date info on future guests and episodes. And on that note, Tom's going to tell us a little something about who's coming up next.
Thanks, Elliot. In a fortnight, Crest, in partnership with Elusive, will be chatting to Welsh ripper and now resident of Chamonix in the Alps, Frankie Pioli. Rob's tried to class himself as living in Les Arts for a while, so I'm sure he's going to be trying to get some tips on how to escape to such a place for good. Well, as long as he takes his mic and interface, that's fine, isn't it? Expect some fond reminiscence about the motherland and its waves, anecdotes from Frankie's dreamy surf travels, as well as plenty of tales of mountain adventure. It's going to be a belter. Well, aren't they all? Anyway, until then, thanks for listening and see you soon. Diolch am gwrando a gwelwch chi tro nesa.
Diolch yn fawr. See you later.
Bye.